phones in what the complaint is. Without that hotline, I think we'd be hard-pressed to capture all of the complaints.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I don't see any other council members or staff in the queue, so thank you for your hard work and for listening to the folks who have weighed in. And I'd encourage you to hang around and hear the folks who want to offer comment at this time. So thank you all. So we're now going to move to the public comment portion of the meeting, and I've encouraged Director Paez and Ms. Brunig to remain so that they can listen and hear your comments. They've already read the comments submitted online, and they were present at the meeting in July where we had about 40 people offer comments. So comments will be addressed to the members up here at the table. If you have questions that you'd like to direct, you are more than welcome to submit them online, and we'll make sure they get addressed. So we'll start with Brooke Bornick. All right. Go ahead. Have a seat. Have a seat. What's your name, sir?
My name is Sebastian Long.
Okay, can you switch to... Okay, here we go. All right. Now, listen, we have about, I don't know, we have about maybe 20 folks signed up to speak. So in view of that, we'll go ahead and say that every speaker will get up to 2 minutes to offer comment.
Okay. Council members, I'm Brooke Bornick, co-founder of Lodger, a corporate housing provider here in Houston. We operate in Class A apartment buildings. The proposed regulation requires property owners to accept liability for all STR violations. This means if a guest breaks noise rules, the building owner would be liable. Think about this. No apartment building accepts liability when a traditional tenant throws a loud party. They never agree to be liable for short-term rental guests either. What happens then? Professional operators like Lodger, who serve business travelers and medical center patients, will be locked out of apartment buildings entirely. The only STRs left will be in homes or buildings wholly converted to short-term rentals run by owner-operators. This creates exactly what Houston wants to avoid, entire buildings becoming de facto hotels without hotel safety standards. The solution is to regulate operators, not properties or owners. This is how hotel occupancy tax registration works. Instead of processing 8,500 individual unit registrations, inspections, and updates, the city can focus instead on operators. This makes enforcement more efficient and targets the real source of problems, irresponsible operators, while allowing good operators to grow and create jobs. After Beryl, locals called us every 90 seconds desperate for housing. If we regulate STRs out of existence, where will Houstonians stay after the next storm? And on the topic of fees, the fee structure should reflect multi-unit operators, since there are efficiencies of scale in dealing with their registrations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Susan Sajadi. Susan Sajadi. Milo Diego. Tom Oliver. Tom Oliver. All right, we'll come back to him. Ted Powell. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, my name's Ted Powell. I own a 100-year-old house in Montrose that I restored, and my wife and I are retired, so we created 2 furnished apartments there that we list on Vrbo and Airbnb. So if you go to those websites, we're listed as an STR. And I submitted a question to Councilman Ramirez back in November when I read when the ordinance came out. And it said for the exemptions, bed and breakfast was listed. And when I went to Chapter 6, Article 6, Article 6, Division 1, it said it's a building or on residential property with rooms for rent on a daily basis with a resident owner, occupant, or manager with no more than 10 sleeping rooms for rent. So technically, I'm exempt. My concern, though, in listening today and what I've seen so far in the presentation, the PowerPoint slides, is that there's going to be a hotline. And I'm also listed, as I say, as a national definition. I'm a short-term rental. And so how am I going to prevent being harassed by people saying, oh, you're not in compliance? There's a lot of money involved. You're talking about daily penalties, maybe even criminal charges I heard mentioned. I'm not sure how that would work. My wife and I are retired. We're running a very differentiated short-term rental. We have people come from all over the world to participate in art exhibits. They're artists. Sometimes we have people here with medical conditions. They're recovering from a brain surgery. We have people come from foreign countries that want their child to be born here, so they have an option to be American citizen. We meet interesting people from all over the world. So it's a kind of a hobby for my wife and I. But we don't want to be harassed. We want to be compliant. But how are you going to do this so that, because Airbnb is going to list me as a short-term rental, I'm not going to have a number, issued number, so it looks like I'm not. But how is any person going to know that? And I don't want to have to deal with this on an ongoing basis. So somebody needs to think about how we protect people that are exempt from this ordinance, because it's not short-term rentals aren't monolithic. There are bad actors, but we are an example of one that is on the other end of that spectrum. Thank you.
Sir, before you go, let me ask you, have you asked Airbnb what their position on this would be?
Airbnb is an entity that is very hard to deal with. I'm not going to say that I'm a big Airbnb fan. It's a kind of these new companies. You really can't get a live person. You can't get it's really on their terms when you ask to talk to them. So that's going to be difficult for me to answer in terms of saying, oh, I can go to Airbnb and say differentiate me. I'm not sure. They may come back to me and say, you just need to register. We're not going to deal with this. At which point my wife and I will just delist, I guess, and we'll go it on our own. But yeah, Airbnb, I'm not. They're difficult to talk with.
All right, Mr. Powell, there are Airbnb representatives here present this afternoon. Maybe one of them will talk to you before you leave. I'd also note that under the proposed ordinance, the definition of short-term rental excludes hotel or bed and breakfast facility as defined in Article 6 of the chapter. We have Councilmember Kamen in the queue.
No, thank you, Mr. Powell. I have a lot of District C speakers, so I'm not going to address everyone. But again, you're one of those STR providers that is exactly who I'm talking about, that we want to make sure that we're not burdening. What I wanted to make sure in this conversation, Chairman, is if there's a question that you need our legal department through the committee to clarify for you.
Well, maybe I file an affidavit with the city saying that I'm testifying that I am exempt based on the ordinance. But whatever it is, just so it's something on file that when somebody on the hotline says, oh, I'm not in compliance, they pull it out and go, okay, he's okay. I don't get a phone call or someone shows up at my front door and I got to prove what I'm doing every time,
Understood.
Thank you, Councilmember Kamen. Thank you, Mr. Powell. And we will ask legal about that. Thank you. All right, I understand Tom Oliver is back. Go ahead, sir.
I'll be very brief. A couple of points. One of the things that has occurred to me over the years of being next door to a party house STR with a pool, I've tried every recourse and I've asked the police and I've asked them and nothing happens. It just doesn't happen. I mean, one of the things we talked about noise ordinances was about 2 convictions. Well, the moment the police turn up, they turn the music off. And therefore, you'll never get a conviction ever. So that would be one point. So there needs to be a way to address that. And especially if someone is standing outside the front of the house, they can't hear what's happening by the pool at the back, which is affecting the neighbourhood. So I think that should be addressed. The other thing that I've looked at a lot is all the STRs I know around my neighbourhood, they all claim 100% homestead exemptions, and they don't live there. I mean, my neighbour hasn't lived there in 5 years, and yet if you look at HCAD, they're getting 100% homestead exemptions because they're technically residential, they say it's their address. That's a good money grab for the city to regulate the entire problem that obviously is going to cost some money. I think my last comment would be certainly being next door to someone who rents out, with a pool, mainly for parties. So pretty much every day there's between 15 and 20 people using that pool, certainly in the summer months. There is no health and safety or hygiene or anything. That pool gets cleaned once every 2 weeks. That's after maybe 150 people have been in that pool doing, I won't explain, which should be up to the same standard as a hotel. I mean, the health and safety and hygiene of one of these STRs should meet the same requirements that a hotel has to meet. Because otherwise it's unsafe to the public for other people who are going to go and stay there. Anyway, that's all I really had to say.
You raised some good points, Mr. Oliver. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Krista Comer. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I also live in the Montrose, and 3 years ago, my neighbor converted her house to an STR, and the most recent party was on Thanksgiving Day, which we spent both having a holiday for our own sons from out of town, but also for our elder in-laws in their late 80s, but also taking pictures so we can provide evidence to Gordon Fraser and to other offices, and including yours, Chair. And this owner has no scruples, period. So I'm not sure always what we mean by a bad actor. Are we, as neighbors, just supposed to put up with anything? We have probably 30 times we've called in 311 calls. I mean, I invite any of you to try sometime. Oftentimes people don't want to take your call. They tell you all the reasons why you don't have a claim, and you insist and you be polite. It's quite a task. So I think that this is the Quality of Life Committee. I don't know that we're having a conversation about quality of life, actually. We're having a conversation about bad actors, a low bar, a lot of self-regulating or self-policing kinds of provisions that people draw a stick figure plan. I mean, it doesn't seem like it invites much compliance. What I have seen in my neighbor is no compliance at all. And I'm not sure where it ends except for us to move. And so I would just say, as I've said in many email exchanges, that neighbors are about quality of life. I think some of the STRs they're monetizing neighborhoods for their own gain. And just a last comment, I would like to see the council continue to work. I appreciate your work, but I'd like to see the plans align more with the Arlington plan, which will address some of the actual issues that neighbors of STRs are facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Comer. Catherine McNeil.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I do want to thank everyone for all the work that's been put in around this issue and this draft. ordinance that you're laying out. And it's been a long time coming, so I appreciate it a lot. I live in the Museum District. I live next door to a 22-unit apartment complex that used to be affordable housing. It's now been almost totally short-term rental units. So I do consider it a hotel. I never was asking that a home or a townhome or a condo be qualified as a hotel. I'm talking about a 22-unit apartment complex that is all short-term rental. There's no enforcement about how many people stay in it. There's no landlord in place. So I do not see, and I'm just addressing this issue of everything you've laid out. I'm just speaking to this. That I don't see anything that in this ordinance that talks about taking good affordable housing off the rolls, which we're in desperate need of in Houston. And two, I don't see how this ordinance responds to someone coming in, buying a small apartment complex and turning it into a short-term rental property that, in my mind, fits the city's hotel ordinance, which would mean it could not exist at the corner of Yoakum and Banks.
Thank you. If you'll hold on just a minute. We have Councilmember Carter in the queue.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Councilmember Carter.
Just curious, are these units listed on any of the platforms that, are they publicly listed?
Yes, they Airbnb, VRBO have worked with us over the last 2-3 years now, and they have been knocked off. But we find them. We found them on Expedia. We find them. There's a network that they work around. And I will also, and I just ask this kind of as a question, because very sadly, one of the residents in the apartment complex was charged with murder of a homeless man that lived at our park. He didn't live there, but he spent a large portion of time at our park. And so now I have residents that are worried if he's now allowed to come back. Right now he's living with Sheriff Gonzalez, but if he were to be out, can he come back and do another short-term rental?
And
because our guy just does, $80
and
a night.
Does this unit have a pool as well?
Yes, it has a pool. It does.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kamen.
Thank you, Chair. Catherine, thank you to you and the residents. Y'all have really brought this issue to the forefront, given what the neighborhood is dealing with. I know you were really focusing today your comments on how it's being used similar to a hotel. Can you, though, just for the record, discuss some of the issues that you have seen arising out of this property, including what has happened pretty much on your property and other residents' properties?
Yes, and when I go to the mapping of police calls and ambulance calls, I can directly point to that apartment complex. We've had domestic violence. We've had human trafficking. We've had Houston SWAT teams come out with drug busts. It's changed the whole personality and quality of life in our area. And I will also say this is a larger impact because we are an undeed restricted, we're a very old neighborhood, and we have never been platted with deed restrictions. So we are very much on our own to have to fight for anything in our little hood. The more short-term rentals there are and that are allowed, the less civic engagement there is. We have a civic club. and it tries to be active, but there's less participation in any civic organization when it's more and more short-term rentals.
Okay, Councilmember Alcorn.
Thank you, Catherine. Director Paez, I think what we're hearing from Catherine McNeil and others is that there does seem to be a difference in the regular short-term rental that's a single family or townhouse and these, especially these smaller complexes. And then what the gentleman brought up earlier about, big apartment building owners not taking responsibility. So I don't know how it's done, but it does seem like there needs to be some kind of differentiation in dealing with them. I'm not sure if that can be done, but that's what I'm hearing. I really respect her point about taking good, affordable housing where teachers were living or parents that wanted their kids to go to the neighborhood school. I mean, that used to be who filled up this apartment building, and now, it's just a flop house. So I don't know how it's done. I mean, we've been talking about this a long time, but I do think it doesn't meet the same criteria as a single family.
Thank you, Councilmember Alcorn. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Dominic Mazok. Miguel Kremenliev. Good afternoon. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thanks. Miguel Kremenliev. First, I'd like to compliment everyone on the work and effort on the 53-page presentation sent out 4 hours ago. Lots of numbers, and I'm sure the legal departments of Airbnb and Expedia and the multi-property owners are proud, as I'm sure they are, of the draft regulations with the overwhelmingly host-friendly look and feel. It strikes a nice balance between overwhelmingly presenting their opinions, giving them what they want, and including clearly biased pro-STR anti-regulation comments in the public area of the feedback, while nicely marginalizing anti-STR voices as illogical or emotional and not fact-based. If one was more focused on tax revenue or looking for the most political cover while running scared on the legal front, a reasonable citizen might understand how they would be persuaded to vote for this as is, not questioning anything. Now, the key aspects that seem self-evident, and since we're either scared or confused ourselves into thinking the hotel residence isn't supported by case law, these should be the bare minimum. But if we Houston citizens are lucky, maybe we can get brought back in from the hollowed-out Arlington rule prohibitions on amplified sound after 10, advertising parties and events, prohibitions on events exceeding occupancy limits, and prohibitions on outdoor signage. I think parking is going to be a big issue, and I would urge this committee to strongly think hard about the types of citizens and neighbors unrestricted parking hurts and the stakeholders they help. In fact, we subject ourselves to valid criticism of cowardice by not including restrictions on number of units owned by a single entity, maximum number of nights per year rentable as a hotel, or if we're thinking honestly and along the lines of types of businesses that have a great potential for significant harm to our most vulnerable and impressionable citizens, keeping these things at least 100 to 500 yards from schools. There are dozens of wonderful examples from cities all over the world who have risen to the challenge and imposed proper restrictions, yet we're considering just mailing it in here on something that will truly define our neighborhoods for generations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Tracy Hall. Lindsay Carr. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, I just wanted to share my Airbnb experience as a host. I'm actually a single home host in the Oak Forest West area, and being able to rent my home through platforms like Airbnb and some of the others mentioned up here have actually opened up opportunities for my personal future along with that of my community that I honestly wouldn't have otherwise been afforded the opportunity to do so. Over the last 3 years, my house has not only hosted linemen and cleanup crews during natural disasters, but also contributed to becoming an investor in a neighboring community of Acres Homes to build affordable housing, making homeownership and even maybe entrepreneurship a possibility for everyone in Houston. My experience has opened up a philanthropic aspect to my life that I'm really excited to scale. My rental generated a linen donation, which has now provided year to date 100 pounds of linen to animal rescues and fosters in and around the Oak Forest area. It's imperative that we do find space to allow ease of access, interpretation, and realistic standards, such as the insurance coverage amounts, when considering restricting Houston's ability to craft creative solutions to give back. Thanks.
Thank you. Ron Reed. Good afternoon. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Council. Commend you for definitely the work that you've done in putting together this proposal. For me, it's about clarity. I think there are a lot of good things in there, but there are some things that may actually discourage compliance with it. So I suggest there are some things that you take a look at, like the tax registration before certification. Why would anyone want to go through trying to get certified or registering for taxes if they haven't been certified to be an STR? Other question is clarity on how do the platforms think about, what do the platforms think about this? Are they agreeing with it? Not. If the platforms don't agree, then again, then how does this ordinance go into effect if the platforms are going to reject it? Seems to be additional requirements for STRs. A lot of the STRs are homes and townhomes, so they're not much different. They're really no different than regular homeowners. So why are some of the requirements for STRs different than what a homeowner would have to agree with? Take like parking. If you've been in the Heights trying to park, that's a real challenge. So why would parking restrictions be put on someone that's in an STR that's different from anyone else that's living in there? And then the insurance requirement seems like a double requirement. Some homeowners already have insurance policies that cover $1 million worth of liability. So do we need another insurance policy for requirement? I think we should take a look at that. And then, some sites or some STRs don't use booking platform. They direct book. So how does this apply to people that are direct book? So for me, it's more about, making the process that people can agree to and conform with and not making it really complex.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ashley Hogini.
Good afternoon. Ashley Hogini, Head of Public... I'm sorry?
You may.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Ashley Hogini, Head of Public Policy for Expedia Group, including Vrbo.com. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. By and large, Expedia Group believes that this draft ordinance is a good starting point. Most of the provisions in the draft are in line with what we see in cities across the country that enjoy a greater ease of compliance than some of the others. While we do have some small remaining concerns, as staff outlined in their presentation, I know your offices have been very receptive to our feedback and similar feedback from others, and we appreciate the opportunity to continue to work with you on that. And on that note, and in particular, I'd like to thank this committee and staff and the mayor's office and their staff for the exhaustive and inclusive stakeholder process through which this language was developed. In our experience, this type of balanced approach has resulted in much more successful public policies. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Kamen.
Thank you, Chair. Just really quickly, thank you for your feedback and working with the City of Houston. But we did hear from one group of residents in District C that said from Airbnb and Vrbo, the listing has been removed, but not from other sites, including, I think they referenced Expedia. Are you available to connect with them during this meeting? And, maybe I'll go outside, but want to make sure that, again, we're connecting residents given the, I would say, horrific conditions of some of these situations.
Yes, absolutely. Please continue to keep us apprised of any of those concerns so we can work on them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Martin Prendergast. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you for acknowledging that there is a minority of bad actors. I am a short-term rental host. I've been doing it for about 3.5 years with my wife. And I would like them gone just as much as the residents and all of you. I have no problem with registering for reasonable fee. Looking at and it is a draft, I realize that, but some of the requirements are excessive. The criminal liability line alone, that scares me. That scares me and my wife, that somebody could commit a crime at our home and we could be potentially liable. I can't think of any other. Would that happen at a hotel? Would that happen at a Walmart? Starbucks? Are they potentially criminally liable if someone commits a crime? So that concerns me. There's things on there like maps showing fire extinguishers, smoke alarms. I've never received a map from a hotel where the fire extinguishers are. I mean, it's just some of the details on that excessive. Sorry, I had to write notes. Yeah, I mean, I fully acknowledge, I can't imagine what it must be like to live next to a place where it's constant problems, constant noise. Airbnb does not allow parties. I don't understand how, for example, if our home had a party and we let Airbnb know there's a party going right now, they can be removed. No refund, okay? I don't understand how this can continue to happen. It makes me wonder if they're even on Airbnb at all. I actually heard from an Airbnb representative that they were trying to deal with a problem home and they couldn't find them on the platform. So one last thing regarding the data, and I realize a lot of work did go into compiling that since July. But I see that they found approximately 8,500 short-term rentals, but yet the call data is based on 4,600, and there was an explanation regarding it was dialing in on, they could only dial in on specific units within an apartment complex. But what happened to the other 4,000? So that completely skews the data, unless I'm misunderstanding something. That's like 50% of short-term rentals are not included on that call data.
Okay. Right, thank you, sir. Esteban Torres. Luis Briones.
Good afternoon, Chair Ramirez and members of the committee. My name is Jose Luis Briones. I am a Senior Manager of Public Policy for Texas at Airbnb. I'm here on behalf of the thousands of Houstonians who host on the Airbnb platform, welcoming people from across the world to this amazing city. In 2023, stays facilitated through Airbnb generated $1.6 billion in economic activity for Houston and $8.5 million in local hotel occupancy taxes. Since Airbnb started collecting and remitting taxes on behalf of Houston hosts, the city has received over $25 million in total HOT revenue. Beyond the economic and fiscal impact, short-term rentals provide critical financial relief for everyday Houstonians. 56% of local hosts use their earnings to offset rising cost of living, and 30% say it helps them stay in their home. The typical host earned $8,700 last year by sharing their space. It's also a lifeline for seniors, with nearly 10% of hosts over the age of 60. On the issue of neighborhood safety, the data is clear. Staff, who just presented before us, found that STRs generate, on average, fewer than one 311 and 911 call per year. And the percentage of calls regarding serious offenses is exactly the same as non-short-term rental residential properties. That said, we remain committed to working with members of this committee, council offices, the Houston Police Department, Harris County Sheriff's Office, and other stakeholders such as neighbors to address complaint-driven violations in the rare instances that these occur. Airbnb supports fair and balanced rules that provide clarity for hosts while helping cities thrive. There are provisions in the ordinance that Houston hosts have expressed concern with, a number of which you've already heard, especially as they have the potential to disproportionately impact the 99.99% of hosts who are good actors. Alongside our hosts, we seek amendments that would make this draft ordinance a thoughtful solution for all stakeholders, protecting neighborhoods while preserving the economic and social benefits that STRs provide. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Noel Freeman.
Good afternoon. My name is Noel Freeman. I'm an Airbnb host. I've been doing this for 7 years. I've got about 600 five-star reviews. We recognize that this ordinance isn't aimed at people like us, but I have a lot of concerns about whether or not this ordinance really addresses the problem. There's nothing in this ordinance that would have prevented or addressed a lot of the problems that folks have complained about. In fact, all of the things that folks have complained about are criminal offenses that are governed by other laws that simply aren't being enforced. There are entire sections of the city of Houston where there is no one at all designated to enforce the noise ordinance. So that's not part of the process that we can really consider here. When you look at cities like Austin, Austin has had their ordinance for 14 years. They've got 10% compliance, 10% registration. Now, Austin's ordinance was eventually ruled unconstitutional, but they never got above 10% compliance. And this ordinance doesn't really provide an incentive, particularly for folks who are smaller time operators. I mean, I'm doing 80% occupancy. I'm Airbnb Plus. You know, I do 100 bookings a year. I have no problem complying with the provisions of this ordinance. In fact, to ARA's credit, they included some of our feedback in the draft ordinance. They included some of my specific feedback in the ordinance that I think makes it better. But there isn't really a big incentive for folks to register and be a part of this process. And so what I've handed out to you today is a presentation that I gave to ARA that proposed that some aspects of this be voluntary. And you can use some of these voluntary aspects as a carrot that incentivizes people to register. For example, include them in a program that would be like a Houston certified short-term rental that is also a network that provides housing to people in times of disaster. I've worked for the city of Houston for 20 years, and I can tell you we love federal grant money. And by creating a network of housing for people who are displaced to live in, if the city provides a rebate of hot taxes to people who do that, guess what? That's a line item on a grant application to FEMA. The city can see that money back. So there are a lot of things the city can do to incentivize participation. But this ordinance, as written, would not have prevented any of the complaints we've seen so far. Thank you very much.
If you could hold on. So curious to know, how would this ordinance affect your bottom line as a host?
Well, the fee itself would be about 2% of my net revenue on an annual basis. There are onerous requirements. I mean, there's a lot of things that we would have to prepare. We've had a conversation with ARA. ARA didn't know that Airbnb doesn't provide us with receipts for our hot taxes. They didn't know that Airbnb doesn't provide me with an insurance certificate for the host cover protection program. There are a lot of things that we would have to figure out how we would come into compliance, even though I'm pretty savvy about the city's enforcement processes and our registration processes, but there are some things that just aren't clear. And, the finances aside, I mean, there was a time when we looked at SafeClear and people said, well, I just can't imagine how $75 would be a lot of money for somebody. I just can't imagine how $250 would be a lot of money for an Airbnb host. When in reality, there are folks who are renting their property for 20 days a year. You're talking about a massive part of their revenue. Why would they participate in that? So for me personally, it's a matter of just being able to provide all of the information that's necessary for the application. And one of the things that I'm going to propose to ARA is give me the application. Give me your draft application right now, and I'll go through it. And we can all identify what the issues are, how long it takes, like Privacy Act requirements. You have to know what your burden is, how long it's going to take to produce that paperwork, and identify issues like how am I going to contact Airbnb to get the information I need to prove that I have the air cover policy, to prove that I've been paying hot taxes. When this came up in July, I've been trying to contact somebody in Airbnb Government Affairs ever since, and I haven't gotten a single response. So I know my way around these processes, and if I can't get a response as an Airbnb Plus who's doing 80% occupancy, what about the folks who are renting for 10 days a year? They're not going to be able to obtain that information.
All right, Councilmember Kamen.
Thank you, Noel. Because we have Airbnb here, I'm going to ask them to actually get with you, please. We need to be making sure, and again, y'all have been responsive if our office reaches out, but for those that are on these platforms that are providing you all with this business and the city with this economic driver, we need to be connecting the dots. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you, and thank you for your feedback and spending so much time on this. I do agree with you that some of the things in this ordinance or proposed ordinance are just regular law violations, that if someone would go out and enforce them, then we wouldn't necessarily need an ordinance. I don't know what the right answer is, but even, in the proposed ordinance, it says, 2 or more citations issued over 2 separate occasions at property registered as an STR within a 12-month period resulting in 2 or more convictions. And if we're thinking about a 1-year time period, say, the police go out there and issue a citation. Well, then it goes to the court system, and then it gets reset. The probability of 2 convictions happening in 1 year, we know how slow the court system is. It seems that, that wouldn't apply very often.
Well, if I may,
sure.
One of the issues with that particular provision is if I have a tenant and they get popped for a noise violation, how do I know they received a citation? How do I become aware that they have a court date? How do I become aware that it was reset? How do I know that they pled nolo contendere and it went away? How do I know that they fought it and they were convicted or they were acquitted of the offense? As a landlord, I have no interaction with these guests as soon as they're out. And I can imagine that some of them probably wouldn't want to tell me that they were issued a citation if I didn't already know, because they wouldn't want me to give them less than a 5-star review. And so there is a piece of this that if something happens, we might not know about it. So somebody having a conviction might be a complete surprise to us because we didn't know the citation was issued, and we, although having a vested interest in the process and the outcome, there is no provision in municipal law right now that allows the city to necessarily include a third party in all of those processes unless the person who received the citation chooses to make sure that we're aware of it.
Right, and that's a great point. Absolutely, thank you.
All right, back to Councilmember Kamen.
Thank you. And I do want to recognize and thank Director Paez for actually staying through all of the public comment. I know that they are striving to work with all of the feedback and everything. Noel, do you find a distinction, though? Like, you are somebody who's very involved with your property. I'm assuming your STR is next to or abutting where you live.
On site, yes.
So you're going to know if something's happening. Do you find any distinction between you and, let's see, an absentee landowner who just is not present has received notice of issues, and it's a perpetual issue that they will not address. So do you draw a distinction, I guess, between an absentee property owner versus someone like you or other residents that are coming that are either renting out a room on their property or have an apartment garage that they're renting out, or are doing this, a few weeks a year, but they're home most of the time? Can you opine on that?
Sure. I mean, certainly there is a distinction between what we say good hosts and bad hosts. I can't speak for every landlord who has a property. But we have heard from people over these months and years that there are on-site owner-operators who are problems, who host people who are problems. So it's not just absentee landlords who are also problems. I don't pretend to have all of the answers. I think certainly when you look at provisions like having emergency contacts, certainly if there's a problem, I can walk out my back door and I can deal with it. But just like if I have a property in Austin, which I do, I couldn't physically be there in an hour. I couldn't physically be there in 2 hours. But one of the things that we do as landlords is I vet my guests. There are multiple layers of vetting that go on. They have to have a verified governmental ID that matches their account. They have to be referred by other hosts. So we're asked this question when we rate somebody: would you rent to this person again? All it takes is one host to say no, and they can't instant book my property. They then can make a request, and I vet them. I look at their review history. I look at how long their account has been created. I look at if they're local. If somebody's local and they're trying to get my place for the weekend, why? But granted, I can't speak to anything related to off-site homeowners because I'm not one. But there is, I think it comes down to a distinction of just simply being good landlords and bad landlords, because there are plenty of off-site owner-operators, and many of them are in this room today, who are good folks, who are doing the right thing. And so, I think the question becomes, how do we treat this in a way that gets to the actual root problem with the problem properties? Because if you look at me, if I were renting my garage apartment as a traditional lease, which I have done before, if I have a problem tenant, the city can't do anything to me other than keep writing that person tickets. I'm not going to be held criminally liable for their conduct. All I can do is say, have they violated the terms of their lease? And then I go to JP court and I initiate eviction proceedings. And there's a process for that that's incumbent upon me to enforce as the homeowner. And so we can't look at this in a way of saying, okay, well, we're gonna hold property owners liable for something that somebody they can't control is doing, when the only difference is 31 days. If it were 31 days, the city would be like, not it, it's on you. And I think that's the real distinction.
Thank you. Just a couple thoughts. One is, we cannot, through an ordinance, make you criminally responsible for what one of your tenants has done. For instance, if one of your tenants engages in human trafficking, whatever ordinance we pass won't make you subject to being prosecuted for human trafficking.
And that's a lack of clarity in the ordinance, and I think ARA is looking at potentially addressing that.
Just to be clear, and any ordinance we pass that's defined as an offense and has a fine attached to it is technically a criminal offense. So a host could be criminally responsible in that respect if this ordinance is violated. Okay. So anyway, you raised some excellent questions that we'll think about, and so I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ursula Jesse. Hi, Ursula.
Hi. So first off, thank you. Many of you all know my story, so I'm not going to repeat it here. I'm here with the Responsible Landlords Group, which you've heard a number of our members, including Noel, come up here and talk already. So I don't want to go too much into what he's already said, but again, thank you so much for the hard work. Today I'll be providing broad overview on the feedback. We do have a lot of very specific feedback that we're happy to present to your offices and teams whenever you are available. So briefly, thanks for the data. As you can see, the issues from STRs are very isolated incidents. I think 27 incidents, 11 of them being at the same property. So let's just be very clear, that's 0.001% or 1 in approximately 1,000 properties that have had issues. As the city has identified the data, there's no difference between an STR and a non-STR residence in terms of incidents. Our initial reaction as landlords is the following. It feels like a lot. Once we read through the ordinance, it feels complex, it feels burdensome. We were overwhelmed and we asked ourselves, who are we going to outsource this to? As someone who's, doing this work, we don't have the time to do all of this in addition to everything else that we are already doing. Specifically, what we found overwhelming were, and we've already discussed this, so I'm not going to get too into this, but being criminally liable for my tenants' behavior, the expectations that we are first responders and need to get to a property within 1 hour. Houston is a giant city. I don't know of getting anywhere within an hour. The registration process, including drawings, parking, emergency exits, high and difficult to find insurance requirements. I know there was some discussion around this today. As a very savvy person, it is very difficult to find specifically what is being requested. 15 days to make changes, etc. These are not normal requests for a single-family residence landlord. These feel more like requirements for a business or a large commercial property or hotel. All of these risk me not being able to rent out my property, which is my right as a landlord. I recognize that this is also a huge burden on the city. I know there's a lot of discussion around Arlington. Arlington has 700 STRs, Houston has 8,500. So just really quickly, the big question is, will this actually lead to stopping the problem properties? As an expert landlord, I would assume that the average Houstonian who has a garage apartment would find this even more burdensome. I will stop there because my time is up, but I have a lot more to say.
All right. Thank you, Ursula. Hold on just a second. Councilmember Alcorn.
Thank you, Chair. Ursula, great to see you, and thanks for your continued work on this. And I hear what you and Noel and some of the others are saying. The way I know how city enforces stuff, we are reactive. I tend to think that we'll have low participation because of what's like other cities, I guess. Granicus, I guess, has, they'll be able to identify the owners. We'll be able to get to, if we see repeated calls for service at a certain location, we'll be able to get to that owner, whether registered or not. So I do take, what you and Noel and others are saying about some of this. I just think that, it's not a great incentive to, I don't want to discourage, whatever we might come up with, but, it's really, I just think we'll have low participation.
Just quickly, I think that is what our initial reaction was too, is you're going to have those of us who are responsible landlords signing up, and is this truly going to get to those bad actors? And we'd be happy to think through ways in which that could be done differently. I don't know the answer at this moment, but I'm sure it's something that could be thought through.
And I know you've asked for a meeting, and we're going to get with the chair and you and the responsible host group.
Okay.
After this.
Thank you, Ursula.
Thank you.
Judson Ozen.
Good evening, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I'm here today not as a person that's against the short-term rentals. Neither am I here today as a proponent, as a owner or operator of a short-term rental, neither of which. But what I am is a person that uses the short-term rentals. I travel. I love them. They do a lot of things for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people. So I'm here today to say that short-term rentals itself is not an enemy. They're really a benefit, a blessing, I would say, to a lot of us. For example, even for the city of Houston, they benefit. They benefit with a whole lot of ways. You've heard a lot of them, a lot of reasons why the city of Houston benefit. Property owners benefit, supplementing their income. The industry itself has a good name worldwide, not just here in Houston or Texas or the United States. They're great. Short-term rentals are a necessity, and they do come in place when there's some type of issue that we're definitely going to have, such as a hurricane or some other kind of emergency of some sort. These short-term rentals are of a great benefit. So I'm here today just to say, be balanced in this thing here. Think it through. Listen to not only there seemed to be a heavy voice for people who are against the short-term rentals. And I'm saying that usually those who speak the loudest get heard, but I would say that the benefits are better in place for those who support short-term rentals. And I end my comment right now.
Thank you, sir. Laura Gallier. Margot Fendrich. Jennifer Yagoni. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me and for having this meeting. My name is Jennifer Yagoni. My husband and I own our home in the Heights neighborhood, and it's our main residence, and we recently, a few years ago, purchased the property next door, which we have listed on Airbnb with a minimum stay of 7 nights. We also own 3 homes in the Eastwood neighborhood that we also currently list on Airbnb for a minimum of 5 nights. I just wanted to convey that there is a large demand for a few nights stay, as well as extending to a several months stay. We request that the city consider changing the definition of an STR from 30 days to 15 days or less, if that's possible. We have many guests or tenants who come to Houston and stay in our home, just as the gentleman before me, who come for work. We also have people coming to seek medical treatment. And currently we do have a tenant that is staying until April, but many others are repeat guests, and they require only a week-long stay. Maybe it's a follow-up treatment, so that would come under that less than 30-day request. Many come to see family, and especially in our home in the Heights, many of them want to stay next to their children or their guests. They come for the holidays, or they come for the birth of a child. Many come from within the U.S. and some from outside. Also, some of our guests that we had that were just a week-long stay in the Eastwood neighborhood, they were here for that Afrotech conference that just happened last month. We've had people who come for less than 30 days for the quilting conference that we just had. And I would even say that we were talking about equal housing or affordable housing. We've even had guests who have stayed who maybe don't have good credit and are not able to stay in a regular apartment and have come and stayed in some of our properties. And I just really quickly wanted to add that we're already complying with many of the things that are in this proposal, and we're happy to do so. And we are very considerate, and we feel badly for people who are suffering due to the bad characters, as we're calling them, because we are the neighbors as well, and we would want to comply with anything that the city is asking. Thank you.
Thank you. Gilbert Okoronkwo. Lou Lieu. Samantha Evans. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Samantha Evans, and I'm a new resident of the East End neighborhood. I spent my savings earlier this year to buy my first home in the heart of Houston, and I am surrounded by short-term rentals. I'm here today because these rentals are destroying the peace and safety of my community. I will clarify, I'm not speaking about people running STRs responsibly, but I am unfortunately not by any of those. I'm surrounded on all four sides by Airbnbs, VRBOs, and Booking.com, and 3 of those are bad actors. 2 of them are still listed on Airbnb, and no, they don't care about parties as they are owned by investment companies or managed by property management companies, not hosts. I cannot call them. I cannot work with them. I do not know them. To be here, I've taken unpaid time off of work, which shows just how serious this issue is to me. Over the past year, I've witnessed and documented numerous incidents caused by short-term rentals. A gunfight, as you'll probably remember from my first time here, involving multiple semi-automatic weapons, leaving my home riddled with 20 bullet holes and causing $7,000 worth of damage. That property is still listed on Booking.com. It has not been removed. Since then, I've had to clean up vomit on my driveway after a wild property, and at another gathering, 2 women provocatively twerked and danced on my garage. That property is still listed on Airbnb. At 3002 Hawkins, a physical fight involving 8 to 10 people broke out during a party, and I called the host and she responded, "Bummer," to my text. An underage party happened at a separate incident, and guests were wandering the streets at 2 a.m., screaming and banging on cars. This house specifically has multiple beds per room and is over 3,000 square feet. These repeated disturbances have forced my husband and I to sleep on air mattresses in our hallway because we feel unsafe near our windows and want as much driveway between the street and our house as we can have. No one should have to live this way. The police often categorize calls to short-term rentals as level 3 or below, meaning they're not seen as urgent. But this meeting isn't about criminality, it's about quality of life. Cleaning up vomit on my driveway or being woken up by fights or sleeping in my hallway robs me of the peace I deserve in my own home. I just have one more portion. I'm grateful for the support you've given me so far, specifically Jordan Frazier and Councilmember Sally Alcorn, and I appreciate this regulation as the first step. I hope the City of Houston can prioritize the safety of permanent residents over the profits of investors.
Samantha, I'm sorry to hear that. Airbnb is still here. Hopefully they will get with you before you leave. We have Councilmember Alcorn in the queue.
Samantha, thank you. Thank you for putting a face to this. And all the responsible hosts in this room see the conundrum we're in here. We can't let this kind of behavior by not hosts. I agree with you. They're not hosts at all.
Yeah.
They're just like investors that are just giving all of you a bad name. So we're in this predicament, and we can't selectively apply the law. And that's the rub here. I mean, that's the issue. I get the burdensome on the responsible owners, but I see this. I see the people over in the museum district, and it's a real conundrum that we have to do something. Now, I look at Noel's presentation he just gave. Everything you just listed is already against the law. So part of my message is to HPD. I mean, this is enforcement. These people you're talking about gunshots against the law. It's public sex and nudity against the law. Drug use against the law. So it's unfair for police to categorize this as, some short-term rental thing. This is just law breaking.
I mean, when they hear the cops, they just run inside. They turn off the music.
So, this is a tough issue. Chair, you said that at the beginning. This is a tough issue that everybody's going to walk away a little pissed off, that they didn't get as much as they wanted or what they wanted. But thank you. I know you keep taking off work. I know you've talked about the investment you made in your first home, and this just makes me so mad. And we need to get. I want to get the name. I want to get that name of that. I know we have it somewhere, but we need HPD to go after, and we need some way to hold these owners accountable near you. Sorry, Samantha. We're going to get somewhere.
Thank you. Ola Jiwa.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
My name is Ola. I am a Airbnb host for like 3 years now. I have hosted a lot of families from out of the country, refugees, people that had cancer, stay in my place for 30 days or more. I have like a bunch of people in my house, my properties now that have been there for 4 months, and I had a family specifically that their house caught on fire. They didn't have a place to stay, and the insurance was paying me, and they were with me for 4 months. So when you hear us say all this thing, you think we're an exception. We're not an exception. We are actually like a typical Airbnb host. 99% of us are good hosts. If you can check the Airbnb platform, almost everybody is like 4.9 and above. You cannot survive on Airbnb if you're a bad host. Like, Airbnb is so quick to flag people. Like, it's a natural course would be like, if you're a bad Airbnb host, I give you a few months, you're going to be off. Airbnb is either going to kick you out, or you're going to have bad reviews, and you're going to lose business and not even get any bookings. So just because they're on the Airbnb side doesn't mean they're getting bookings. They're probably empty. Like, we walk on eggshells because Airbnb is quick to delist us. Like, I had a lady trying to book my place, and she was blocked by Airbnb. She was local, that's why. So she was flagged. I vetted her. I know she's good, but I couldn't even bypass it. Even though I'm telling Airbnb, she's not. She just needs to stay here because her house is being done. Airbnb was like, no, you meet the requirements of your local. This is urgent. Why are you booking the same day? You're local, but she needed an emergency place to stay. Airbnb wouldn't even book her because they're very, very strict on accepting people because they don't want trouble. So I don't know how other hosts say they can reach Airbnbs. I never had issues reaching Airbnb. They're very quick to listen to we Superhost, and I've had a lot of times they've helped me. So just one complaint to Airbnb, you're going to get delisted. So I think Samantha, I don't know why she's still having these issues, because I feel like one complaint alone should have delisted them, and they'll be fine. So I think, I'm sorry I'm going over, but I think the best thing is to individually attack this bad host with the help of Airbnb. Airbnb is eager to help. If we can attack them and not punish us, because my family, we're going to suffer from this. I'm not going to be able to be in business, I promise. If this goes on, I can't. It's very low margin. I can't make it, So I'm just going to be out of business if this goes through. So thank you.
Thank you. Mehdi Rais. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Mehdi. I've been here a few times to speak to you guys about other issues. Today I want to talk about being a 10-year host of Airbnb. So I probably guess most of you have stayed at an Airbnb or had family stay at an Airbnb and have had great experiences. My wife and I got into Airbnb to help create a way to make savings for our kids and their education, teach them how to be entrepreneurs, and then somehow engage the community, a community that I didn't know before 10 years ago. We are five-star hosts for 10 years. We've been featured in Airbnb Plus listings, Superhost, and also featured in Houstonian Magazine. To date, we haven't had a single complaint from a neighbor. It hasn't happened. We've had 27 complainants come to this committee for a handful of properties, and probably an even smaller handful of hosts. I'm also a homeowner. My neighbor had an Airbnb. The marketplace actually took care of that. The individual had parties, was a party house, and the marketplace actually saw that close down. So I want to say there are protections in the marketplace to get rid of bad actors. So we have a perception of disorder, and we now have data. Your own data says there are no increase in serious crimes in the area. If you live in a desirable area, it's probably because you have higher density where there's more things offered. That's what the data was showing you. So more governmental services, more parks, more restaurants, more things to do. The mapping that ARA showed you showed more Airbnbs inside the loop. So more desire, more Airbnbs. More people, more density, there's probably going to be more problems. And this is probably across the boat, across the state, across the country, anywhere. We can't solve for density. That's not something that we can solve for here today with this committee. SDRs have made, previous number was $20 million in hot taxes. Today I found out it was $25 million. That's 6% of the cost of a stay. So take that $25 million number, divide it by 0.06, you're going to have somewhere around $400 million in revenue that's been generated just by Airbnbs here in this city. over the years. That's an incredible amount of revenue, and that's not revenue going in my pocket. That's revenue going to all of our service agents, repairmen, cleaners, accountants, anybody that supports us. So it's an enormous amount of revenue that's helping support the community. So do we want to throw out the baby with the bathwater? So there's some parts of this that I can get on with, and many of the hosts can get on with. Registration seems reasonable, but particularly egregious and what came up is the criminality bit. So you have promised that the host wouldn't be responsible criminally or the landlord wouldn't be responsible criminally if a guest were to commit a crime. But we think in the ordinance, if you go through it again, it does have that association. So I would urge the members of this committee to review, hey, if somebody comes and stays in my place and does something bad, I'm not, my wife, my kids who help at time to clean the place, we are not participants in criminality. We are simply law-abiding citizens. There was one comment that said there's less civic engagement. I challenged Sally Alcorn and Abby Kamen. I'm on my civic association board. I'm on my super neighborhood board. I'm deeply engaged in my community, and we are the people. We are the civically engaged community. We're here, and we're imploring you. Let's make some reasonable changes here. To Samantha, I feel horrible about Samantha. I think I just think it's been handled horribly. That's terrible. Nobody wants that. What are the HPD calls to that area? What does that look like, and what's the response rate? I think it starts with HPD.
If we can start to bring it to a close.
Yeah, certainly.
Appreciate it.
But I just wanted to say one final thought. So you had started and mentioned something about the sidewalk ordinance that came up earlier. The sidewalk ordinance also had at least half a dozen community engagement around the community where we went out and talked to the community. We haven't done that. We haven't done that at all. We've simply put this at 2 p.m. on a Monday or Tuesday when the community can't really engage. I would say in earnest, let's try to reach out to the community and have this open dialogue. We haven't had that. Let's include HPD, let's include Airbnb, Expedia Group, and let's include all the members of the community.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.
Brad Pritchett. All right, Jason Ginsburg.
Thank you for having us here today, council members. I'm Jason Ginsburg with Houstonians Against Airbnb. Hi, guys. We met regarding this matter a few months ago. The legal department cited the Arlington's STR ordinance as a law that could withstand legal challenges. So it's no surprise that this draft ordinance has a lot in common with that ordinance. But what is shocking is that the Arlington rules for preventing house parties have been left on the cutting room floor. The Arlington ordinance sets maximum occupancy at 12 people, but this draft does not. Why do you need more than 12 people at a house if not for parties? The Arlington ordinance prohibits guests from parking on the street, but this draft does not. Most homes already have sufficient parking. They have garages and driveways. Why would STR guests need more parking if not for parties? The Arlington ordinance prohibits amplified sound outside after 10 p.m., but this draft does not. The Arlington ordinance also prohibits congregation outside after 10 p.m., but this draft does not. Those missing protections allow pool parties and other outdoor events while neighbors are just trying to sleep. In fact, the Arlington ordinance specifically prohibits advertising and hosting events at STRs, but this draft does not. It seems that the draft has been written to allow STRs to continue to operate as de facto nightclubs at the expense of their neighbors. But why? Why do we deserve less protection than Arlington? I think that each of you should either answer that question or you should demand a better draft than this. I am an attorney who represents many responsible STR owners. My clients just want to provide an alternative to hotel rooms and have no interest in hosting parties. They can live with tighter controls. And as neighbors, we literally cannot live without tighter controls. And you, as our representatives, need to send a message to STR owners that if they cannot make money without house parties, then they are in the wrong business and they need to get out of it. And if I could just add one last thing with my remaining time, I mentioned I'm an attorney. We're taught from day one in law school that like every problem can be solved with money. I'm sitting up here, I'm hearing these STR owners saying, citing, and the fine folks from Airbnb citing that, billions of dollars. The last gentleman, $400 million. And then I'm hearing from the city department that, we'll charge them $200 a year to register. I mean, why not just up the registration fees and create a dedicated HPD task force and a dedicated service worker at the city to just go specifically after these bad properties if there is really all this money being generated by this in the city of Houston. I would like to see that explored as a means of enforcing this. Thank you.
All right, Jason, let me just add here. In the July meeting, we had a presentation from legal where they talked about a number of cases involving short-term rentals where cities had enacted different ordinances, and a lot of the cases overturned ordinances. Arlington's was not overturned, and according to their presentation back in July, the Arlington ordinance was challenged because it limited STRs to a particular zone. All right, that was found to be okay. Arlington is different in that it has zoning. Houston doesn't have zoning. And so it could very well be, Jason, to answer your question, that not every provision of the Arlington law was challenged. Okay, I haven't read that case. I'm an attorney as well, but my guess is provisions like the restriction on assembly were not challenged in that case. There are other cases where regulations on assembly have been challenged and an ordinance has been thrown out. So although the Arlington ordinance may have been upheld based on one or two specific challenges, that doesn't necessarily mean that every provision of that ordinance has been upheld in court. And so, Councilmember Alcorn.
Well, respectfully, if I may respond, then the question becomes, why weren't those provisions challenged? And if they weren't challenged, there's probably a good reason for that. They probably have legal support. And why are we, running from an ordinance that otherwise has not been previously challenged? Why are we assuming that in Houston those would be attacked, whereas they were not in Arlington? I don't know why we were operating under that assumption. Thank you.
Hi, Jason. To your point about using some of the revenues, like to get a task, I thought that was a great idea. It was brought up by Councilmember Flickinger and others, and we looked into that, using some of the money, revenues that the city makes off short-term rentals for a special task force, HPD, and was told can't use hot tax for that. Has to be, there's state law governing hot tax and how it's used to promote, city come to the Houston, tourism and all that kind of stuff. So we can't use it for HPD task force thing. But I think that's a good idea, and we could find other money, hopefully.
Yes, and if they said that, I'm sure that's true, CM Alcorn. However, that goes back to my idea of just like upping the registration fee as a means of...
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, as a means of covering it. I mean, we hear a lot from people that are like, hey, this is just my one investment property, but the reality of it is that, I'm not sure of the local statistics, but in America, like 70% of the STRs are owned by 27% of the operators. I mean, for a lot of these people, it's a very, very, very big business. And, for the city not to be able to enforce a law and for people like that poor lady to continue to suffer while these STR owners are raking it in exchange for a $200 a year fee. It just sounds horrible. It seems like if this is really that big of a business, and when I look at our District C, and it looks like it's a huge business, it seems to me that these folks, these very fine folks, can afford to pay a little bit more, especially if they have any empathy for that lady and people in her situation. I think they would want to pay extra money to assure a dedicated task force to make sure these bad operators who are soiling their names are eliminated. I think that would be very worthwhile.
All right, Jason, following up, one of the restrictions you propose, it's not been placed in the proposed ordinance is a restriction on assemblies. There is a case involving the City of Austin, Zatari versus City of Austin, and this again is from the legal presentation back in July. Austin's STR ordinance imposed conditions: no assemblies between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., no outdoor assemblies of more than 6 adults, no more than 6 unrelated adults, or 10 related adults using the property. And that was challenged, and Austin's ordinance was overturned. The court said that the provisions limiting assemblies were unconstitutional, and that was part of the reason Austin's ordinance was thrown out. So, again, it's still a work in progress. It's not a final product at all, but some of the provisions that you may be asking for have already been ruled on in court and found to violate the law or be unconstitutional.
And it's understood that, hopefully we're a city, we all have to live together, and so therefore we have to compromise. But it should be understood that, we need protections against big parties and big events. And I think, the STR operators in this room would want that as well. That I don't think that's the kind of operation. My clients don't run those operations. They don't run those operations. The question is, how do we eliminate this? And not only, we can't just say, oh, here's a law, how do we enforce that law? And I think it's going to take some more thought and some more work. And the draft is a good start, but I think it's just that.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
Thank you for having me.
Mac Hoke. All right, is there anyone here who hasn't signed up but would like to speak at this time? Come forward. Oh, you're, okay. Yeah, there's a gentleman in the back. Okay, we'll come back to you. What's your name, sir?
My name is Billy Desai. MBA, CFA, thank you for the time. I've been hosting for 10 years. I'm a super host on Airbnb. I'm a multifamily owner. People have been talking about owners like me. I am an investor. I Airbnb studios, one-bedroom apartments all over the city, in Montrose, in the East End. We pay over $100,000 in property taxes a year. I've bought these properties, many of them derelict, rehabbed them, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to make that income, right? And what I'm concerned with is this ordinance is a solution. It's not the correct solution. I think it's an improper solution. It's the wrong answer. The data doesn't even show a major problem with STRs, but the issue, I think, is not even Airbnb. You have actors who are, on Reddit, unregulated, non-platforms. The guests are the problem. The guests who cause these disturbances and these parties. If you get the bad acting platforms out of business, I think you're going to solve a lot of this, and you don't need this ordinance whatsoever. I will echo the need for HPD. What is going on in the city? You have homeless people on the streets, mentally ill people on the streets. You have bad local actors. Why should we be discriminated against as STR owners? We have our own property rights. Everyone is free to move, to buy a property, to obey the law, and obey the deed restrictions or non-restrictions. I know my neighbors. I've never had to call the police. I'm a super host. I think this is going to affect my quality of life. I have a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old. I'm a family man. This is our business. This will directly affect us, but the thing is, we're good actors. This is not the right solution. If you want to spend more time with me to learn my side of the story, I'm surprised how underrepresented we are in this room. I'll be happy to spend time with anyone who wants to speak to me and elaborate on this. Airbnb is not the problem. You have bad actors, bad guests, not hosts in many cases. I don't allow parties. I don't want people to destroy my property. I'm protecting the neighborhood. I'm protecting my property. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, ma'am, would you come forward? What's your name, ma'am?
My name is Dorothy Conley, Conley.
Okay.
And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you all. And thank you for all the work that you've done. It is truly amazing. But I am a super host, and I have never had HPD have to come to my property. I have guests that are from Ukraine, China, all over the world that have come and stayed. And some I have one guest that came from her place out of the country, and she's been there. They turn into people who stay there. Some people, and I want you guys to look at when you do the final draft of the ordinance, to think about it, you are affecting people, that there are people who cannot afford to have apartments. And with an apartment, you know you have to have the first month and the last month and the good credit and the this, that, and the other. And there are people that live in Houston that don't have all that. And they come to a home like mine and they stay. That's where they live. So, and I've never had the police come to my property. We've never had any misunderstandings. They become friends. And I don't rent the whole house. I rent a room. And it's almost like you meet somebody in college. And they become friends. They cook and everything. That's their home. So I would like for you to think about the humanity that goes along with what you are about to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Conley. Let's see, was there another hand of someone who hasn't spoken who wants to speak? Oh, yes, come forward. What's your name, ma'am?
My name is Claire Goosey. I thought I had signed up to talk.
That's fine.
I have been doing a short-term rental for 8 years. I'm on Vrbo and also on Airbnb. And my homes are in the medical center, and most of my clients, renters are from MD Anderson, Texas Children's. And so we're serving the community. I think that this is going to be a big burden on small people like me. From listening to everything, it sounds like the problem is if you're not on one of the major platforms, because there are strict rules about not having parties and very, very, very structured on Airbnb and Vrbo. And I'm one of the, the good agents here. But it sounds like you need maybe something for people that are not resident, or for, how do you get to the corporations where they don't care? So the ordinance ought to be for someone that has, maybe 10 properties or more. But I don't think you're going to solve the problem, because the bad actors are not using the major platforms. And they're still going to, in my opinion, break the law, disturb the public community, our neighborhoods. And so I don't think we're going to have compliance on this. You might drive some people out of the short-term rental market, and don't think it's going to solve the problem. I really think that go after the bigger fish. They're the ones that are causing these problems, and not us small fry. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet who would like to speak? All right. Yeah, I see you, Mr. Long, but you've already spoken. Listen, you can offer additional comment online, or you can reach out to any one of the council members here, and we'd be happy to pass those comments along. But we have to finish at some point. Yeah, and I think we might have a meeting set up with you. So my understanding is next steps, ARA and legal are going to take the comments that have been made in addition with the comments already made. They will meet with council members, and we will continue to fine-tune this ordinance. And the hope is that we will have an ordinance to vote on by the end of January. So that's what's next. But I want to thank the council members who have stuck it out to the bitter end, council members Alcorn, Peck, and Huffman. I want to thank the staff who's assisted. From District A, Alan Roman has worked the board. Sonia Soto has assisted online. Gloria Rodriguez has checked folks in. And Leah Wolfthal has helped out with messaging and so forth. So thank everyone who participated. The next Quality of Life Committee meeting will be Monday, January the 6th at 2 p.m. So we're going to call the meeting adjourned at this time. Thank you all for being here.